Hello everybody, welcome to the Star Trek Deep Space Nine review show. My name is Fletcher, about to say hi is Data.
Hola.
Today we're going to recap, rate, and discuss Season 1, Episode 7, Q-less. Alternate title, Lots of Q.
Yeah.
There will be full spoilers through this episode, and since we both have seen the whole series, possible accidental minor spoilers for later in the show, but we will try to avoid doing that. This episode originally aired February 7th, 1993, over 2 years before the release of the classic teen comedy film Clueless, and also 6 days after the Next Generation episode Aquiel.
Yeah,
So,
apparently he did another Q episode for Next Generation, like, shortly after this, or something, I was reading.
Oh, nice. Well, do you remember what happens in the episode Aquiel? Because
Aquiel is...
I didn't remember it very well, and I looked it up.
I feel like that's a Geordi falls in love with the girl episode, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so is that the one where, like, they think that she killed someone, but then it turns out it's like a goo monster or something?
Yes, exactly.
That's the dog? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it turns out it was the dog the whole time. I just thought that was interesting because of the, obviously it's kind of a, I don't know if you want, like, not a copy, but a homage to The Thing. But I just thought it was kind of interesting because it involves a goo shape-shifting monster. So I felt that was relevant to bring up.
More shapeshifters. That's what this universe really needed.
And we can't say that Deep Space Nine copied from that. So, but maybe did they catch some early episodes of Deep Space Nine, or did they get it like a little inspired by Odo?
Maybe.
Like one of the Deep Space Nine writers was talking all about Odo, and then one of the Next Gen writers was like, "Oh."
It's funny you say that because the guy who wrote this episode had written one other episode of Star Trek before, and it was the Next Generation episode, Fistful of Datas. And I was like, oh, well, that's not the... I don't think anyone was looking at Fistful of Datas and was like, we need to get this guy to write some more stuff.
That's, I mean, I don't really see the connective tissue between the two episodes, honestly.
Yeah.
The Fistful of Datas was just such a weird episode.
Not that this is not a weird episode, to be, fair.
There's some weirdness. I think it's some slightly less intentional weirdness.
I went to look at the Aquiel thing to see if there was any mention of, inspiration for it. But the one thing I did find was they're like, so yeah, the Next Generation had just lost its only married couple, so it was hoped that this episode would show that, like, serious relationships and marriages still exist in the 24th century, because basically we have a ship full of single people at this point. It seems to me like that's not a comment we should be making, that marriage and serious relationships don't survive into the 24th century. Yeah, okay, that's fair.
I feel like you got to trust your audience to believe that marriage still exists in the future. It's like as soon as O'Brien and Keiko leave, it's like, oh, did marriage stop existing in the universe?
Also, apparently, before they figured out who the killer was going to be, the plan was that Geordi would keep that dog for the rest of the show. Nice.
Maybe working with the dog changed their mind. Okay, so anyway, we begin with Bashir on a date with a Bajoran woman, telling her the epic tale of how he became second in his class at Starfleet Medical, while O'Brien sits at the next table and listens in.
I guess we're supposed to be very much with O'Brien at that point, but I 100% was. I was like, oh god, this guy's insufferable. Why does he not stop talking?
Luckily, Bashir is apparently good-looking enough that his date pretends to be interested. Unluckily, he and O'Brien are called away to an emergency at the airlock. It seems Dax and some ensign are doing some sort of mission in the Gamma Quadrant and had a severe power failure in their runabout, which I believe was the Ganges. Luckily, O'Brien is able to get the runabout door open before they run out of air. Surprisingly, the rescuers find a third person in the runabout, whom O'Brien instantly recognizes as Picard's old love interest, Vosh, or as he says it, Vash.
I've always said it Vash. I don't think that that's at all correct, but that's how I always say it.
I'm pretty sure they always said it Vash on Next Generation, because it does sound like the wrong way to say it. Oh, and I was reading the memory alpha for this episode.
Yeah.
And apparently, since Vash is the French word for cow, in the French version of the show, they had to change her name.
Nice.
Anyway, a little trivia. We learned that Vash, or Vash, has apparently been alone in the Gamma Quadrant for the past 2 years, since before the discovery of the wormhole. What a mystery. As they escort the survivors away, the camera lingers on a mysterious crewman doing repairs on the runabout door. He turns around to reveal his identity. Q!
Bum, bum, bum.
Oh, and then we have our intro. We didn't record our thoughts about the intro sequence last time. I don't know if you wanted to bring those up now.
Yeah, I've been meaning to bring up the intro to this show since we started, basically, but it's just... I swear that it's longer than the other ones.
Yeah.
And it's I think when I compared them all, it was like maybe a little bit longer, but not long enough that it should have stood out to me as being, but it's just, it feels interminable.
Yeah. It's just so many angles on the space station. And I mean, the song is fine, but it's just so sleepy.
Yeah, just angles on the space station. There's nothing visually interesting happening, and it's not a bad song, like you say. It's just it's very sleepy is a good enough word for it. Yeah, I'll go for that.
So yeah, I do find that I almost always skip the intro, or I get about 10 seconds into it, and I'm like, skip.
I don't think there's any Star Trek show that has such a good intro that I wouldn't be skipping it. Like
True.
There's some there's some shows like Firefly. I want to sit through and hear and watch that intro every time. I love that intro. Mm. And there's some other shows like, lately I've been watching Futurama, where it's like, I could skip the intro, but it's so short, why bother?
True.
And then sometimes there's this sort of thing.
On Futurama, they just sometimes do like a 1 second intro, so.
That's true. I don't know if they do that on the streaming. Maybe.
Sure. I think they do whatever they aired with, so. Well, anyway. Yes, the only intro that I sometimes will watch is the Next Gen intro. Just because, you can get really pumped listening to that song.
It is a very, energetic song, the Next Generation.
Yeah.
I like it.
And it feels like it's, it's like if the remote control is, more than an inch away, I won't bother, skipping it.
I'm probably the same way. It's like, I could listen to that.
Yeah.
And the Voyager song is also, you might call it a little sleepy, but the visuals are way more interesting in that one. So
True.
I'm like, okay.
I mean, it has a nice song. Some of the visuals, where it flies through, a stellar flare, and then it, flies over the rings of a planet, and it, messes up the rings on the planet.
Oh, yeah.
When it flies over. I always thought those visuals, they're interesting, but they're also kind of weird. And, just the scale is so obviously wrong on all of those shots of how big the Voyager would be compared to those things. But, yeah, you're right. It's they put effort into it. That's the thing. Whereas they were like, how can we make this interesting? As opposed to, let's have the ship fly by the camera 8,000 times. So credit where credit's due. Anyway, at the infirmary, Bashir gives Vash a clean bill of health. And the two share a flirtation. This could be my chance to get into the main plot of the episode, thinks Bashir.
I don't know. I feel like they don't share a flirtation in that scene as much as, he's flirting real hard and she's just kind of okay.
Well, yeah, she's kind of she's going along with it. At least. She's not, shutting it down.
Later on, I think it's a little more two-sided, but at the same time, I'm almost like, is she trying to get a free dinner at this point?
That's fair. That's fair. Bashir, at least as we're told by the show, is good looking. So.
Yep. And he's, I don't know if we're supposed to actually believe that he's real successful with the ladies. He tells O'Brien, he's like, yep, that story works every time. And I'm like, really? Does it though?
Yeah, Up to this point, we've never seen Bashir have a successful date with a woman, but that's also not the focus of the show. So
thank goodness.
I think Bashir, at this point, has not learned that his so far his interestingness in the show is directly tied to Garrick. So what Bashir needs to be doing is hanging around Garrick's more and more, so he'll get more screen time. Anyway, Vash heads immediately to the station assay office, which is still running, even though it's not like a mining station anymore, is it?
No, yeah, they don't do any mining at this point.
But there's like a Bajoran assayer there. Anyway, and she deposits a variety of artifacts, not seeming to mind the incredibly imprecise inventory taking process.
Or the, like, sarcastic dude doing it.
I just, like, he's like, various jewels.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe let's write down what those jewels are.
That was the one that got me. Even if you're not going to write down all the jewels, which there's a big bag of jewels, fine. Maybe at least, like, an exact weight of them so that there's proof whether or not some jewels were missing. He doesn't even do what he does with one of the other ones, or two of the other ones, where he's like about this many kilograms or whatever. Like,
and well, that's another thing. Is this is an assay office, right?
Yeah, that's what they call it anyway. I guess it's kind of different.
Usually, a facility like that would have like scales.
Yep.
Like a ruler. I don't know. Whatever. Among her items is a mysterious glowing crystal, which will never come back in the rest of the episode.
No, completely not important at all.
Sisko meets Vash on her way out of the assay office and extends an invitation to go to the Daystrom Institute on Earth and tell them about her adventures in the Gamma Quadrant. At first she seems reluctant, but ultimately agrees, as she has not been to Earth in 12 years. Inspecting the runabout, O'Brien finds himself unable to account for the power failure. Sisko asks him about Vash. O'Brien just says that he assumed she was Captain Picard's girlfriend and makes no mention of Q or the Robin Hood situation. Maybe he was going to get around to it, but he gets interrupted by a sudden power fluctuation. At Ops, Dax reports that this power drain is exactly like the one she experienced on the Ganges.
Yeah, they take a really weird approach to trying to figure out this mystery, because it's like, okay, it happened on the Ganges.
Right.
It's happening here. Maybe the first thing you should do is look at people and things that were present in both of these scenarios. And they're like, nah. Let's just see if we can figure out what's causing this power drain on the station. Let's not look at all at like the similarities between these incidents.
It's like, come to think of it, that lady had a mysterious glowing crystal with her, but I'm sure that's not related. O'Brien shows Vash to her guest quarters, as station bellboy is now apparently one of his duties. Vosh asks about Picard and says she'll have to look him up, teasing a return to the next generation that will never happen. Once alone in her quarters, Vash is visited by Q, who complains about her leaving him, and begs her to rejoin him in his own weird, self-centered, egotistical way. She is dead set against the idea, apparently having had her fill of Q for a lifetime.
Yeah, who can blame her?
Yep. The scene is interrupted by Quark, whose quirky sense was apparently tingling at the possibility of profit. He and Vash negotiate to offload her Gamma Quadrant grave-robbing spoils at an auction. Vash uses Umox to negotiate a favorable deal. And was Umox introduced in the Next Generation? I feel like it was.
I don't recall.
Like in an episode with
with Troy's mom? Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. That was just something I was wondering. Because like every little thing, I was like, ooh, is this the first time that this is mentioned?
Right, especially with Ferengi, who, they got a lot of expansion here. Yeah,
as they build that Ferengi lore.
Yeah. It would make sense. When was that Menage a Troy episode? That was season 3. So yeah, I mean, that must have been, if it was in there, that must have been the introduction.
Quark leaves long enough for Q to return and express his disdain, but they are interrupted once again. This time by Bashir, who is making his play to secure his status as a main character. He asks Vash out, and she agrees to a date at Quark's, which she apparently just immediately forgets about.
No, she doesn't. She mentions later, like, hey, your doctor was supposed to meet me here half an hour ago. Where'd he go?
Oh, well, I guess I missed that line. I was like, how come Vosh... Like, she doesn't even, like, call him, but whatever.
See, that's why I think she wasn't really all that invested.
True. She's like, whatever. I can get lucky somewhere else. Bashir is intercepted at Quark's by Q, dressed as a waiter.
A Bajoran waiter.
Yes. Q puts a drowsiness spell on Bashir, who leaves to go lie down.
Yeah, that was some weird, like, hypnosis shit. I don't think we've ever seen Q do something like that without, the Q flash magic thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, who knows how Q's powers work? Like, can he change the state of somebody's brain? We've never seen him do, like, that before, so maybe he has to, like, I don't know.
Well, I kind of assume that that's what he's doing when, in a few moments... when he first makes everybody disappear and then he brings everybody back, and when he brings them back, they're already, like, cheering on this fight. And I was like, so did he, like, force them to cheer on the...
Well, I mean, like, were those real people, though? This is always, like,
Well, we know at the very least Quark and Vash were brought back in that crowd, so the others, there were, like, Bajorans and stuff, that were probably just the crowd that was already in Quark's.
So, and then, they're not cheering on, but they seem completely unfazed by the fact that Sisko and Q are about to be in a boxing match. So, that was a good question. But I always wonder stuff like, was the Sheriff of Nottingham a real person? Like...
Yeah, or, like, when he first shows up, he creates a whole courtroom of people to, like, jeer at them, and so...
Or, like, when he summons a mariachi band for, like, 2
Oh, yeah, see,
seconds.
like, I just went to that part of the episode. Like, Morn's in the crowd. Like, he appears, and he's got his hands up, like, moving them in an encouraging way for this fight.
There's lots of, like, Morn sightings in this episode.
It's true.
He just, like, walks by in the background.
Yep.
I was like, man... He just must be such an easy, like, extra. Yeah, so I just always assumed that, Q kind of, like, creates NPCs or whatever for these little things. Luckily, the waiter disguise isn't enough to fool O'Brien, who immediately recognizes Q and reports him to the commander. And apparently, also, we learned that there was, I guess, a conference on Q or something, or there was, like, Sisko went to an in-service training on Q.
Yeah, it seems like the kind of thing you would want people to be aware of.
I mean, at the very least, I feel like they should be, like, circulating memos about this stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, watch out, there's this guy. He may trap you in a Robin Hood world. We don't really know what to do about him, so... O'Brien uses this opportunity to bring up the Q-Vosh connection, which he never thought to bring up before. Suddenly, another power failure hits. O'Brien can't come up with an explanation, so decides the power failures must be being caused by Q. We cut to a completely unrelated scene where Quark and Vash are looking at the mysterious glowing crystal. Quark tries to scam Vash out of it, but she's too savvy for him. Sisko shows up in Quark's and confronts Vash about Q, who is luckily sitting right there in the background.
He's happy to jump in. I do like Quark's extremely half-assed attempt to scam her, but being like, well, clearly this isn't worth anything. And I'm like, really? That's your tack. It's not like, oh, I've seen one of these before, I know what this is, it's worth about this much. It's like, no, this thing, that's not worth anything.
Yeah, this mysterious, spinning, glowing, pulsating thing. It's nothing. What kind of bothers me is that, like, because we established in the auction scene, like, Vash does care about archaeology.
Yeah.
And so, like, she starts giving the whole history of, like, this statue and the cultural significance of it or whatever. But apparently this crystal, she's just like, I don't know, just something I found somewhere.
Yeah, you gotta wonder exactly where that came from.
I mean, so she just saw it laying on the ground somewhere and it was like, that looks valuable. I have no clue what that is, but... Sisko asks Q to stop the power outages, but Q plays dumb. Q does some typical Q stuff, culminating in an old-timey boxing match. After provoking Sisko with taunts and punches, Q gets knocked out by a solid blow from Sisko. Q complains that Picard never hit him, but delights that he's learned that Sisko is more provocable.
Yep.
Again, teasing future Q appearances that will never happen. Spoilers.
Yeah, whoops.
So yeah, I think that's like the classic scene from this episode.
Yeah, you hit me. Picard never hit me. That's the most iconic.
Yep. And then also Q says that Picard was a better verbal jouster or whatever. And I don't know how much I agree with that. I feel like Picard was pretty much always doing the exact same thing, which was basically, go away, Q.
That is most of what Picard does, yeah.
It's like, we do not want you here. Please leave.
We are too busy for your shit. Please go away.
Yep. But, whatever. Q obviously has some kind of, crush on Picard or something. And wants to be friends with him, as we learn in the Picard series.
I still haven't seen it, so...
I won't spoil anything, but it's just there's just some stuff that, in my opinion, is too dumb to spoil. I won't say anything, even though I really want to. There's just a moment in the finale of the last season where it's just like, oh my gosh, this is what we're doing, but whatever.
Apparently, I did see an ad that the next season is the final season, so...
Yeah, I heard that, I think that was even before season 2.
Oh. They
had announced that they were going to shoot seasons 2 and 3 back to back, and that they would be the final 2 seasons.
Well, at least they got a plan.
Yep. As the station's technical problems continue to escalate, a bunch of shady aliens show up on the station for Vash and Quark's auction. Odo confronts Quark about the auction and hints that he was hiding in the room when Quark and Vash made their negotiations. But if that were true, he would have known about Q, so that's gotta be a bluff. Odo also seems pretty tempted by the idea of a latinum-plated regeneration bucket.
It was weird how he's briefly like, oh, no, never mind.
Yeah, well, yeah, because, the expected beat would be he acts tempted, but then, he drops back into his Odo mode and goes, no. But he just sits there and thinks about it. He's like, how fun that might be to be in a bucket.
I don't know how you plate anything with latinum, though, because, latinum is always inside of gold. It's like a liquid, as we learn later.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you plate something with that.
I don't know what latinum actually is. It's gotta be, it's not like an element, right?
I guess not.
It's got to be some sort of chemical compound. Because sometimes you might talk about, liquid silver or something, but you're really talking about, a solution of silver in something or something like that. But, silver is an element, so it kind of makes sense to talk about it like that. But it's when you're talking about latinum, it's you assume it's the same substance, in liquid form. I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of latinum alloy or something that they use to plate stuff or whatever. And so suddenly I remember, wasn't there a time where Quark dreamed about having, it was either gold-plated toilets or latinum-plated toilets?
I don't remember this.
Okay, I'm just going to move on from it then. It's always a moment, I think he said gold-plated toilets in that scene though, so... But he didn't call them toilets, he called them waste receptacles. He's like, we could have gold-plated waste receptacles. I don't know. That's complete tangent, not worth going down. Q confronts Vash on her way to the auction and gives her the symptoms of a terrible disease he claims to have saved her from. Vash remains committed to having nothing to do with Q. And I like in the scene, there's just apparently just some bystanders watching this stuff happen. Because he transforms her into, horribly sick plague mode.
Yep.
And then he takes off, like, some random guy runs up to help her. So I was like, it's just, like, one of those things where, like, is this just what life in the Star Trek universe is like? Where you're just always witnessing stuff like this, and you're like, is this something I want to get in the middle of or not? Back in Ops, the crew try to figure out the power outages problem. Dax comes up with a plan to trace the source. Sisko says he'll give it another 8 hours before ordering an evacuation of the station, indicating that he is aware of the concept of evacuation. Q shows up and taunts everybody, basically saying Picard and Data and everybody would have figured this out by now. The auction begins and is going very well for Vash and Quark, but unfortunately the station begins to get pulled into the wormhole. Since Sisko makes no attempt to sound any alarms or start an evacuation process at this point, Q visits the auction to tell everybody of the danger. The glowy crystal goes up for auction, and a bidding war drives the price sky high, much to Quark's delight.
Well, part of that is Q.
Well, true, but I mean...
at
the very end, when he, like, bet 1,000,000 bars, definitely.
Well, yeah, but I think he comes in even before that. Like, he's the one who does 3001 or whatever.
Well, yeah, sure, I mean, but...
I feel like he's trying to keep it going long enough for the others to show up. Because if he hadn't done that, then the auction would have ended and maybe everyone would have left.
Okay, it could be. Just like him, like being like rolling his eyes and being like, "Okay, I'll help these guys solve the situation."
Yeah, maybe.
Unfortunately, Dax is able to trace the source of their problems to the auction, where it turns out it was the glowy crystal the whole time. Sisko has O'Brien beam the crystal into space. Okay, first of all, I believe his order is, like, lock onto my comm badge and beam it, like, 300 meters off the docking ring or something.
Yeah, something like that. Some number of meters.
Why doesn't he just say beam it as far away as possible?
Maybe that is as far away as possible.
There's just a little detail that bothered me. So he beams the crystal into space, where it immediately transforms into a glowy space mantis and flies away through the wormhole. Nobody makes any attempt to explain what that was all about, and we're left to assume the crystal was some sort of space egg or something.
Yeah, it's just like, there you go. That's
so the power failure stopped. There was a weird mantis that flew away. I don't know if this is like an evil being going to terrorize the people of the Gamma Quadrant. Who knows?
Well, apparently, like, according to the wiki, in the original script, there was like a whole other section after that where I guess they go after it or something, and Q wasn't really involved in that, and so when they brought this guy in to, like, rewrite it or whatever, he's like, no, you don't need any of that.
It's like, these people have been watching Star Trek long enough, they'll figure it out. Later, Quark tells Vash about a newly discovered archaeological site on Tataris 5, I think is how it was said.
Something like that.
And proposes she go there and steal more artifacts to sell. At first she seems committed to returning to Earth, but Q shows up and makes fun of her decision. She makes it clear one last time that she wants nothing to do with Q, and he finally seems to agree to leave her alone, lamenting that he will no longer get to see the universe through her eyes. After Q leaves, Vash seems to change her mind and asks Quark about the quickest way to Tataris 5. The end.
And then Bashir wakes up from his nap that he's apparently taken this whole time.
And then Bashir's like, oh, did I miss the episode?
That's what you get for trying to horn your way in on the episode.
It's like Krusty the Clown showing up at the end.
Yeah.
I've been on vacation. What's going on? It's like, yeah, we had a weird crystal space egg that turned into a space mantis and flew away.
Yeah, too bad you didn't see that. You love, like, alien life.
Yeah. So, that sounds like something maybe like Starfleet would want to study, or...
Whatever.
Yeah. Whatever.
So, the weird thing that on this rewatch stuck out to me about the episode most was, like, those guys with the blue colossus over their faces.
Yeah, I was just like, who are those guys?
I was like, I want to know more about them. And we get, like, one of them gets named because he buys the necklace or whatever that she has. And it's just like, This one goes to Rule the Obscure.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that's a good name. But there's no additional information out there about these aliens, as far as I can find. I was very disappointed.
And this was another time where I was like, I feel like the makeup department got told, like, a bunch of crazy-looking aliens show up on the station. And so it's like, ooh. Because, like, you know, the makeup, especially on that one guy, the guy who calls Quark an obsequious troll.
Yep.
Was, like, really intricate, I felt like.
I don't know if this is accurate, but he reminded me, maybe it was just a personality, I don't know about the face, of like, soup-eating guy from that previous episode.
Oh, yeah. Could be. His voice sounded really familiar, but I couldn't quite place him. I don't know if it was that same guy or not.
But yeah, Quark immediately has a list of people that he gets to show up on the station at super short notice who are wealthy and interested in artifacts.
I mean, yeah, this is definitely not Quark's first rodeo in this. And he's probably been planning for this since the discovery of the wormhole.
Yep. Although it is funny to me that people who would collect artifacts would be not interested in their history. I'm like, isn't that kind of...
It's just a pretty it's like, write down the story. It's like, I'll trust that it's really valuable and interesting. Just write down the story on your certificate of authenticity. And, like, I'll read it later.
Like, she's trying to tell them the name of the being represented on the statue, and Quark's like, yeah, whatever, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Like, but I think you would, right? At the very least, you want to label it when you stick it in your collection, so I don't...
True. Yeah, so that's why, like, probably, like, what do we call this? Oh, call that lady and, like, get her to, like, give us the Cliff's Notes on that story again, or whatever. But I don't think, like, because it was the 18th something of something, or the 19th. So I don't think it really made a difference to them whether it was, like, the 19th or the 20th.
Yeah. This episode is so... I like Q in general.
Uh-huh.
But this one seems just really weak. And it may be because there's no... I mean, okay, there's the story of the power drain and the creature thing, which gets very little expansion, like you mentioned. Like, okay, we found it and it was a creature and we beamed it out there. So I guess you could call that the primary story of the episode, but it's not expanded on or even that interesting. And then you have the Q story, which is cute. He has some of his best lines, I think. Some of the most fun, just being silly Q. But even for him, this seems like a really light story where he's just like, no, I want the girl back. I don't want to travel alone.
Yeah, that's... Q is, like, completely incidental to this episode.
Yeah, like, you could take him out and nothing would have to change.
But like you said, like, Q is also kind of some of the most entertaining stuff in the episode.
Yeah.
So, it's a little bit weird of a storytelling choice. Usually on Next Gen, Q causes the action of the episode in some way.
He shows up and does wacky stuff, like puts them on trial or gives Riker powers and then watches how fun that is. Or the one where he loses his powers, it's all about him, like, adapting to not having his powers or whatever. So he's almost always, like, the driving force here. And here he's just, like, making some jokes, getting in a weird fight with Sisko. But other than that, he's just, like, hanging around being sarcastic.
So, yeah, I guess really it's a Vosh episode.
Yeah.
Because it's about her, like, she's torn between, does she want to go back to Earth and become, like, a respectable archaeologist again? Or does she want to continue her exciting grave-robbing ways? Represented by Quark, I guess.
But see, at best, she's a minor character from 2 previous episodes, and that's assuming that you watched all of The Next Generation up till now, right? So you're not invested in her like you are in the other crew. Like even Kira's episode, like it was the second episode if you count the premieres too. That's her episode where she's dealing with her internal stuff. But you're more invested in her because she's a main character, even though it's only been 2 episodes, as opposed to Vash, who I'm like, I don't care where you go from here.
Yeah, I'm pretty just like, you're never going to see Vash again, or you're not going to see her. Even if she does recur, you're never going to see her till, like, another season later or whatever. I think it would have been more engaging if we do know that she has more recurring roles. And I was thinking, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be Vosh, but I would love to see, like, an Indiana Jones type Star Trek show.
Oh, just like an archaeology. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And, like...
That should have been Picard. After he retires, he becomes an archaeologist and is going on Indiana Jones adventures.
Nah, he's too goody two-shoes. It's got to be someone like Vosh.
Yeah, okay.
Who's
that's fair.
But maybe not quite as, like, unscrupulous as Vosh.
She's pretty unscrupulous.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, let's be fair. Indiana Jones was going and stealing stuff from other nations and bringing it back to stick in his personal museum.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So he's pretty unscrupulous, but he also wasn't like, all that matters is profit. If the choice is between learning stuff and profit, I pick profit every time.
Yeah, she literally says that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess you could argue, like, Indiana Jones, he steals stuff to protect it from grave robbers. Or something. I don't know.
Because, like, the very first time we see him, he's, like, stealing that idol, right? And there are other people after the idol, so maybe you could argue that he's trying to get it to stop them from getting it, but I don't think that's why he's doing this. You don't have to go there and go in and get it to stop someone else from getting it. There's other ways to do that.
You could probably, you could tell the local authorities unless they're corrupt or whatever. But there's this guy who's he's kind of started to get a big YouTube channel. And he, I guess he's like an archaeology student or he's an archaeologist or something. But he basically does like videos about mainly like archaeological conspiracy theories that he debunks, like the Baghdad Battery. But like kind of a thing he talks about a lot is like a lot of what people called archaeology back in that era in like the 1800s was seriously just straight up grave robbing.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the artifacts that we have from then, we're at the end of what we can learn about them because no effort was made to like record what context they were found in.
Mm-hmm.
Or like a lot of them, like the Baghdad Battery, we don't even know exactly when and where it was found, just a general kind of area and place.
I just read today a thing that it was like this letter has come to light that they think pretty much proves that Howard Carter robbed King Tut's tomb and like took the treasures.
Interesting. No, okay, my recollection of that story is because he suspected where the tomb was, right? And he claims he knocked a little hole in the wall and peeked in and saw what was in there, but he didn't go inside until like he could gather the proper people. So are they now saying like he did go inside and stole a bunch of stuff?
So basically, because when they got in there, there was a thing where he like makes a little hole and the dude is with him, is like, hey, can you see anything? He's like, yeah, there's amazing stuff in there. And then like later they come back and there's like all the treasures and the bunch of the really valuable stuff is not there, and he says, oh, it must have been like looted in ancient times or whatever. And so apparently there have been suspicions basically since the beginning that he had gone in there, and there's even a report of someone on the team that they'd like seen him coming out and then like trying to reseal it so that there wouldn't be evidence that he was in there. And then after he died, like his family was selling artifacts that seemed to have maybe come from the tomb, and so there was lots of suspicions. But then recently a letter apparently has been found from a guy who like Carter sent him a thing, like an item of some kind with some inscriptions on it that he wanted to find out what they said basically. And he told the guy basically like, no, this isn't from Tut's tomb, this is a different thing. But I'm trying to get more information about it. And so this guy goes to another guy, like the head of the British Museum or whatever, and gets his help. And the other guy's like, oh yeah, once you interpret this inscription, this is clearly from Tut's tomb. It is like, it matches all the other stuff that was in there. And so the guy writes, the letter that was found is this guy writing back to him and being like, you've put me in a really awkward position and I don't know what to do here. I didn't give your name as where this thing came from to the guy at the museum, but like I'm not thrilled about where you put me on this.
Yeah, that's pretty suspicious. I started reading this article a while ago about this. It's basically about this guy who's like an expert in like the sea peoples.
Okay.
Who were kind of like an enemy of the Egyptians, and not much is known about them.
Yeah.
But and like there's a culture that's been found in Turkey that is a strong candidate for the sea peoples, and he's like an expert in them, and he's made lots of like he's been involved in lots of like real very important digs, and made lots of real very important discoveries. But also I think it was after he died, and people were allowed access to his office, it became clear that he had like manufactured a lot of the artifacts he discovered himself, and was like in the process of like manufacturing other ones. Like they found notes like where he was designing like inscriptions that he would put on stuff, and it kind of like caused this huge like I guess scandal in the archaeology community.
That's a shame.
It's like who can you trust in this archaeology community? Right? Apparently,
yeah,
shady stuff in the archaeology world going on. But yeah, like because it was like Tosk last time, and I was thinking, oh man, I would totally watch a Tosk show. And this time I was thinking the whole time, I would totally watch a Vosh show, or a character like Vosh. Like, maybe tone down Vosh a little bit on her, like, just straight up robbing archaeological digs and selling the artifacts. But, that could be... You could go a lot of places. I feel like the problem with the new Star Trek shows is they're kind of... Like, I feel like Deep Space Nine is the most imaginative of all the Star Trek shows, in being like, what else can we do with this universe?
I can see that.
Whereas the other ones are like, oh, we have a Federation, we have a crew of Federation people doing this.
Well, I guess that, what's the new one, like, with the new animated one where it's like, alien prisoners or something find a Federation ship, and there's a Janeway hologram that helps teach them things or something,
No, I have not. Is that one's not out yet, is it?
Hold on. Star Trek animated. I think it is, but now I'm not 100% sure. Let me see. 'Cause I haven't watched a lot of the new Trek, I will admit. Like, Discovery and Picard and...
yeah, I gave up on Discovery after the pilot.
Prodigy. That's what that one's called. And it came out in 2021.
Oh. I have to check that out. Yeah, I like Discovery, and I think, if I understand right, Discovery has a lot of twists and turns and stuff, but it's still basically like the story of a starship. And then Picard is just, more Picard. And the new one, New Horizons, which a lot of people have been saying is really great. I watched the first episode. I was like, okay, this is another Star Trek show. I mean, it's literally the Enterprise. Or what's it? New Horizons?
Strange New Worlds?
Yeah, why did I say New Horizons?
I don't know. But yeah, Strange New Worlds, I've heard lots of positive about. I haven't watched it. The only new Trek show I've watched is Lower Decks. And I love Lower Decks. It's hilarious.
Yeah, see, like, Lower Decks, that's, like, an interesting premise. But, like, most of the new Star Trek shows, I feel like, are, trying to pander to the familiar.
Yes, that's more than even being the same sort of formula. I feel that's the real issue, is that we've gotten into, we can't do a new thing. It has to be, like, ever since Enterprise is where it went off the rails for me, because it's like, we're going to do a prequel. And I was like, but that's not what Star Trek has ever been about. Star Trek is like about moving forward and doing the next new different thing. But now there's like 4 prequels, or I guess, because, like Strange New Worlds is also a prequel. And I think, if I understand it right, Discovery starts as a prequel, but then moves to the future or something. I'm not sure, because like I said, I didn't see that one.
I've heard something like that, but I don't know the details at all.
And so I'm just like, no, like, we don't need to keep revisiting the same characters. I know, or And even with Enterprise, like Enterprise had some interesting stuff where like they did the stuff with the Xindi and we're seeing all these new races that we haven't met, or even the early, like meeting the Andorians and like seeing kind of how like Tellarites and Andorians and humans and Vulcans are coming together to form the Federation.
Right.
I'm kind of okay with that because we never got to know those races that well. But it's when they're like, we have to bring in the Borg and the Ferengi, even though it makes no sense.
And we have to explain why. We have to come up with a convoluted reason why, like, this didn't get recorded in history.
Yeah, and so we got to go to the Mirror Universe again, even though there's, like, no one had ever heard of it when Kirk went there. And so that's where I feel like it's really started going off for me, and then just, even Picard, which obviously does take place further down the line, is like, but we need to, like, basically have all the same characters that you already know.
And, like, and I've only seen season 2 of Picard because it had Q in it. I heard Q was in it. I was like, oh, I'll check that out. And it was just like, they did basically a Star Trek 4, where they had to go back to modern times. And even there's a scene with the bus guy in Star Trek 4 who's playing his music really loud.
Yeah.
They have that guy back.
Oh.
In a cameo in a scene where like 7 of 9 and someone are riding the bus, and like 7 of 9's like, you turn your music down, but this time he just politely turns his music down.
Oh, well, there you go. He learned his lesson.
Exactly. But there was a lot of pander, and it just kind of this lame story. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they pollute the earth, or it's like the immigration crisis. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how terrible this immigration crisis is. And I'm just like, oh, do you have a solution to the immigration crisis? Because I'd love to hear it. Oh, you don't? It feels like they felt like putting the word Picard in the title, having Patrick Stewart in the show, would be all they needed, and story, or like just a really good show, was a secondary consideration.
Well, maybe they were right.
Maybe. I mean, they got me for a little bit, at least.
Yep.
Although, there's a Section 31 show that they keep talking about. I don't know if it's still even going.
That I would actually...
Yeah, like...
I mean, depending on when it... okay, hold on. Star Trek series. Now I gotta find out if this is... Section 31 Star Trek series. What happened to the Section 31 Star Trek spinoff? Okay.
What happened? I don't like the sound of that.
Right? So the Star Trek franchise expanded, blah, 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 blah. More spin-offs coming. Section 31 was the first one announced after the premiere of Discovery, but many shows have premiered since, and it hasn't aired an episode. For that reason, a lot of fans are wondering if we'll ever see it. We have all the answers for that.
Oh, good.
What's happening with this Michelle Yeoh-led series? Michelle Yeoh, I don't know how you say it.
I think it's Yeoh, or... I don't know.
Okay. There are still plans for it to happen. When is this article written? As of March this year. So that's a while ago still. Mm-hmm. Okay, but it's like a spin-off of Discovery. Like at least this character is from Discovery, which I guess then I would have to watch Discovery to... Mm-hmm. But it has been in development for a long time. One currently airing Star Trek show needs to end before production starts. So Section 31 will happen, but decision makers are clear that one thing needs to happen before. Paramount Plus programming chief says that in order for it to happen, one of the currently airing Star Trek shows needs to end.
That's a shame, because like, even if it's a spin-off of Discovery, like a spy show in the Star Trek universe.
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested in seeing...
That'd be something fresh and interesting, although the universe in Discovery just doesn't seem that interesting to me. Like, it feels kind of like stripped of its Trekkiness from everything I've seen, but...
So, apparently there's also now a concern that she has now become a rather bigger star than she was when they first proposed this.
Oh.
So, that may be an issue.
Just do it without her. Like, or just do a Section 31 show set in the Next Gen era, or Deep Space Nine era.
Oh, because she just did that movie that was really big, right?
Yeah, the Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Everything Everywhere. I haven't had a chance to see that yet, but everyone that I've talked to is like, it's amazing. Apparently the fun quote was like, if you're going to see one movie about like crazy multiverse stuff, make it that one and not Doctor Strange.
I don't hate on Doctor Strange as much as everybody else.
No, I don't have the problems that a lot of people have.
I mean, I agree with a lot of the criticisms, like, in a movie called Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, the only other universe they went to was the one where green lights and red lights are switched.
Yeah. So mad.
But in general, and I felt like it wasn't I wasn't super satisfied with the ending for Wanda.
Yeah.
But I mean, I loved when Doctor Strange was possessing his own corpse and was trying to give this inspirational speech
Although the sudden appearance of crazy demons or whatever really opens up way more questions about the universe.
Yeah. Anyway, this isn't a review for that, but
no, yeah. Let's, I guess, back to this episode. We went really far afield for a long time.
What are we talking? Oh, Q-less.
I do like this one thing where Armin Shimmerman is quoted as being like, "Well, it was interesting to watch, like, John Delancey, because, he was a guest. Like, this is our show, and we're only 5 episodes in or whatever, but this is our show, and he was the guest star. But he's been playing Q on Star Trek for so long that it's almost like he was the guy and the regular, and we were all the visiting people." And then John Delancey responds to that by being like, "Oh yeah, I love that quote from Armin. That's a great."
Yep, he's got that Star Trek cred already.
But yeah, so this, I don't know, do we want to move into ratings?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, how would you rate this episode?
This one is tough for me because, like I said, I like Q. I even like Vash.
I do want to say I like Vash. Like, and I feel like the actress who plays her does a really good job with it.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I just never get really excited for a Vosh episode of Star Trek.
Okay, so yeah. While I like Q, I think he has a lot of fun stuff in this episode. I like the interaction with Sisko and all that. And I even mentioned last time, like, he's got that put down on O'Brien about, weren't you one of the little people? Yeah. And so all of that is fun. I like all of that. I think the episode itself, like, the story is really weak, and like, we're really missing any emotional impact to anyone that we care about, which has been the strength of this series so far, is the way that they're really playing into these characters. And like, the best episodes have been the ones where, like, these characters get this emotional, like, we get a look at them or something important happens. Right. And this is like none of that. This is very a shallow episode, I think is what I would call this. This is a fun but shallow episode. And so I think I would have to go like Lieutenant Commander.
Mm-hmm. And it's like not every episode has to be like a really deep character episode, but a lot of the fun episodes, the fun comes from, we know these characters so well, and it's like them being in these situations that, like, gives us enjoyment.
Yeah, and if this had been, even if the character stuff was Q, and it was, one of those Q episodes where Q's doing something wacky, but it's like Q is...
like Q learning to be mortal or something.
But it's like Q is going after this human girl who left him, and he's like, "Hey, come back." Yeah. Like, that's...
he's basically just bored and lonely, and wants somebody to explore the universe with him some more.
Yeah, it doesn't even feel very Q to me. Like, that's not the kind of thing that we see from him, and maybe that was the point. It's like, look, he's like, being with Vash has given him some character growth. It's given him another perspective. Yeah. But if that was the point, I don't think you hit it hard enough to make me care.
Yeah, he just kind of like, he doesn't even bring it up till the very end. He's like, I did like having that new perspective on the universe or whatever. But oh well, goodbye. And
it's one of those things where it's like, they mentioned those other planets they've been to, and she's like, "What was that one planet where they called you the God of Lies?" And he's like, that was like a term of endearment or whatever. And I'm just like, it's one of those things where you get into a show or a movie and they start talking about the adventures that they've had. And I'm like, that would have been a much more interesting thing for us to watch. All of these things you're talking about, I would rather have seen than what we're seeing.
It's like falling into that pit of Gundarks.
But he does have he has a lot of good lines. Like he's got the one about how like, oh yeah, Picard and his lackeys would have solved all this techno babble hours ago. No wonder you're not commanding a starship.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so Q is fun. He gets some good stuff.
Right.
Bashir even gets that great bit where Q says something and he's like, "My God, you're an impertinent waiter." And I was like, "That's great." That's
that was a great. I just love that that's his reaction.
Yeah.
When the waiter comes up is like, "Stay away from Vash." He's not like, "Wait, how do you know Vash?"
She just showed up today on the station. How do you know her? He's just like, what impertinence?
So how dare a waiter talk to me like this?
Oh my gosh.
Yep, that was for the brief time Bashir was in the episode. He had a nice little shining moment.
So yes, all the funny bits are what takes it from like, you know, because we established like the bottom 2 ranks are negative and the top 2 ranks are positive. And right. So,
or the top 3 and bottom 3 or whatever.
Well, yeah, that was before we included the halves and stuff. But yeah, so that's the fun little moments and the fun lines. That's what takes it from a negative to a slightly positive for me.
Yeah. I also agree with the Lieutenant Commander rating. So, would you give this higher or lower than the pilot, Emissary?
I would probably, I'd probably definitely put it lower than Emissary. Okay, I feel like Emissary had the story in Emissary at least is really good. Well, okay, well, I'm not going to rehash that. We had a whole episode about that. It has plenty of issues, but yeah.
Yeah, it's it's good, but it's not quite Deep Space Nine. Yet. Okay, so I agree with that rating. The whole time I was feeling kind of like the Tosk episode, where it's like there's the elements that I really like, but overall as an episode, it's just like it doesn't quite work in execution. I think I gave that Tosk episode a Lieutenant Commander also.
And Babel, you gave a Lieutenant Commander.
Yeah, so I think... or the name of the Tosk episode was Captive Pursuit, right?
Yep.
I just can't quite... I mean, it's like down to the wire whether I like this one or Captive Pursuit more. And I think I'm going to give it to Captive Pursuit.
Okay.
But it's really close. But I gotta pick, and that's going to be my pick.
Okay.
I feel they will always be right next to each other in my rankings, I feel like. But yeah, so for pretty much all the same reasons you said is why I give it, Q is great, but I mean, what's he even doing in this episode? If you're do a proper Q episode if you're gonna bring Q into Deep Space Nine, and do more Q playing against Cisco.
Yeah, because that was probably the best part. Is I mean the fight section and just when Q's insulting him. Yeah. I want more of this relationship, and I feel like that's a missed opportunity for some Cisco character development. Yeah,
is to have Q give Cisco a really good dilemma and see how Cisco handles it. And, compare that to Picard or whatever.
But I like the fan theories that Q never shows back up because he's just like, I don't want to get punched again.
Yeah. Well, if you don't want to get punched, don't
be so punchable.
Don't put your person in an old-timey boxing match and then punch him repeatedly in the face and then taunt him to punch you. I feel like it's not a surprise that someone's going to punch you in that situation.
He just seems so surprised. And I'm just like, really? Because you've literally set up a boxing match and you punched him several times. I feel like even Picard might have taken a smack at you if you did the same thing there.
Yeah. I don't think Picard would have. I think Picard would just, because Picard's so used to Q, Picard would have just continued being like, Q, stop, seriously. No, stop. But Cisco has less experience with Q.
Riker would have hit him.
Oh yeah, Riker totally would have hit him. But I think Cisco has no experience with Q. He's like, well, maybe if I punch him, he'll stop.
He's so confused, and it's funny because the punches are clearly doing nothing to Cisco. He's just standing there, and the head jerks back with each punch, and he just comes back. He's not at all uncomfortable or anything about it. And eventually, it's just he's so annoyed that he's like, okay, this has got to stop.
And I like when he first creates the boxing scenario or whatever, Sisko has this really quick but really great line reading of, I forget what it is, like, what the hell is this? And then at the end when he punches out Q, he has this look on his face like...
Yeah, he's like, what did you expect?
it's like, you want to get punched, you get punched.
And he hates Picard, so like, I'm not Picard, it's just delivered so well, where he's just like, don't even compare me.
He's like, I'm so glad that you said that I'm different from Picard.
Okay, so Sisko's line is just, what?
Yeah. That's great. Oh, man. Yeah, pretty great. So, man, if they would have had more of that stuff, it could have been gold.
Yeah. Is it weird that, like, some of my favorite moments or most memorable moments are memorable because they were on, like, cards in the card game?
Like which?
Like the Q face with the big twirly mustache or whatever, like that sticks out in my brain because it was on a card in the Star Trek customizable card game.
For some reason, I don't remember as many of the Deep Space Nine cards as the Next Gen cards.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
But or sometimes I'll be watching the show, and because some of the Next Gen cards are very vague, and it's like it'll just be like, this satellite or whatever that was part of a plot of this one episode. Mm-hmm. And, like, it's a really important card, and you play it a lot, but you don't think about where it came from. Then when you see the show, it's like, oh, that was it?
Yeah, there were a lot of character cards like that for me, where it's like, if you're playing a Romulan or Klingon deck, then you didn't see this guy very often. But he has good skills or whatever, so he's in my deck, and I play him over and then you see him, and he's in, like, this one scene, and for most of it, he doesn't even look like the one shot that they picked for the card. Yeah. So it's like, oh, that's that guy. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times they even made up those names.
Yeah, probably.
For some of those characters. Yep. Okay, well, I guess that's about it for that episode. No final thoughts?
I hadn't really thought about it much before, but now that you said it, it just kind of opens up all these regrets that we didn't get to see Q again, and
yeah,
because he shows up several times in Voyager, which is part of, I think, the fan theory where it's like he doesn't mind showing up to Voyager repeatedly. He has a weird thing for Janeway, in fact, but he never shows up to Deep Space Nine again because Sisko knocked him on his ass. So
the only one I remember from Voyager is when he and the Lady Q made a baby by touching fingers together.
Yep.
For some reason, that moment was just, like, really stuck in my brain.
Well, and I think that, I feel like there's, like, that's the episode where he spends the whole time trying to get, like, Janeway to have his baby or something, right? And then at the end, it's like, I'm going to make a baby with the female Q.
I don't even remember what the plot of... If that's the plot of that episode, that's a weird episode.
Oh, apparently there's a Q card, a Q dilemma of him as the Bajoran waiter. I was searching for the one with the mustache, and that's the one that pops up.
Is it called Impertinent Waiter?
It's called I Tried to Warn You, and the quote on it is, "You're making a terrible mistake."
Huh. But he wasn't even making a terrible mistake.
No, he was not.
He just wanted to go on a date. And I bet it would have been a nice date, too.
If you began this mission with only one non-Borg personnel, opponent places... Q makes that mission unattemptable and unscoutable. So yeah, if you have one guy, he puts them to sleep, so you can't do the mission.
So it's basically like Q cock blocks you from going on the mission. Okay,
gosh.
Makes sense. Anyway, that does it for us today. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. I'm Fletcher. About to say goodbye is Data.
Adios.
Have a wonderful day, and drop by anytime you're feeling homesick.